What if the biggest thing holding you back in high school isn't your confidence, it's not your grades or your personality or what you can or can't do? It's a label that somebody gave you and you're still believing it. Maybe someone once described you as too dramatic and now you feel like you always have to hide your emotions. Maybe you got good grades when you were younger and now everybody expects you to always be the smart one and you're expected to get into a good college and choose a hard major and be perfect all the time. Maybe you tried a sport once and you weren't very good at it, so you labeled yourself as not athletic. But in reality, you really want to try out for this sport now in high school, but you're labeling yourself and thinking, that's just not for me. Even that one girl who seems to be mean to everybody probably has a label that she's struggling with, and that's why she acts that way. High school has a funny way of turning one small part of us or one meaningless moment into your entire identity. But a single moment doesn't define your entire personality, especially not in high school. But after hearing those things enough time from either your peers or adults, or even just thinking those things about yourself, you believe that that's just who you are. You act from that identity as if you were born with it. Hi, I'm Ashley, and I'm here to help you build confidence and self-trust and worth in yourself so you don't have to go through life thinking that you're not good enough. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that I've learned in my journey to help you with yours. Here's the truth that I wish every girl in high school knew. You are not your labels. And the moment you stop believing that, it just opens up so many possibilities for you. I know high school is probably the same as it was when I was there decades ago, but there's your athletes, there's your popular girls, your quiet ones, your artsy ones. There's always these little cliques that are grouped by their labels. And a lot of times that's fine. People kind of go along with those and that's just who they are for their high school career. But when you start to build your entire identity around that, especially into adulthood, that's where you can start to see some problems. When you continue to put yourself into that category, you feel like you're not allowed to change. You're not allowed to break out of that little shell that you're in. And after high school, you become that label in real life. Maybe you were always labeled as the responsible one. So now you feel this pressure to be perfect all the time, especially at your job, and you take on more that you can handle and you start to burn yourself out. Or maybe you were known as the awkward girl and now you avoid social situations that would be really beneficial either in college or in your career because you're afraid you're going to embarrass yourself. So you choose not to do it. The problem is when you believe that label, you stop trying new things because you think it doesn't fit who you're destined to be. But that's just not true. Identities aren't fixed. You're literally at a stage in your life right now when you're discovering who you are. You're supposed to grow and experiment and change. For me, growing up academically and just personality-wise, I was a middle child. So I was always just pretty average. I was an A and B student. I was a good learner. I was a good kid. I was smart, but I wasn't like honor roll material. I was never in like the upper classes. I was very what you would call mediocre. I love to act and to be creative. And I remember being younger and thinking if you're creative, then you're not a brainiac. And I would think about my future and I was like, okay, I'll probably get a fine job, probably in the creative field. In the creative field, you don't usually make a lot of money. So I'll make just enough money to get by, but I'm never going to change people's lives or have life-changing money, or I'm not going to go to some prestigious school. I remember not even looking at any of the schools beyond, technical colleges or maybe like some local schools. I was limiting myself based on my experience as a student. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that my identity was, I'm just enough. And looking back, that's really how I operated in life. It's basically what I became. I mean, honestly, I don't know how I got my husband because he is above and beyond and amazing. But I remember I worked myself to death as a wedding photographer and I undercharged because I didn't believe that I was worth more. I was average, middle of the road. I took jobs that didn't suit me. I never really stepped out of my comfort zone in my profession. I did things kind of by the book and I didn't pursue anything outside of what I thought that my identity could handle. I didn't have a whole lot of hobbies. I didn't do a lot of things that put myself out there because I didn't think that I was big enough or important enough to do things like that. I never dreamed of building my business bigger than an income that could just get us by. See, labels will quietly limit your life. You don't really think about it, but they're not just describing you, they're limiting what you think that you're capable of. So, for example, let's imagine a girl who her label is, I'm not confident. So she believes this about herself. So she doesn't try out for the team. She really wants to be a cheerleader, but she's like, I'm not confident enough to do that, even though I really think it would be fun. She doesn't raise her hand in class because she thinks that she's going to sound dumb. She doesn't talk to any new people, so she kind of stays in her little circle that may not be super supportive. It's not because she can't do those things. It's because she's convinced herself that she can't. Now let's take another girl, and let's say that she's labeled as the shy girl, but she decides one day, you know what, that's not even really who I am, and it's not who I want to be for the rest of my life. So she starts to take these little steps to break out of that identity. She signs up for something new where she's going to have to interact with and meet a lot of new people. She speaks up when she has a question or when she's nervous about something. She slowly builds that confidence, and that shy identity just naturally starts to fall away because the belief that she has in herself is, I can put myself out there and I'm capable of these things. And that belief can change everything for her in her future. If she stayed the shy girl, she might not go after that big job offer, or she gets accepted to a college and she thinks to herself, oh, I can't do this. I'm too shy. I'll never make it at a big university. See, we get to decide our identity. Nobody gets to assign that for us. Even if there are ways that they describe us, we are not those things. So somebody could describe me as anxious, and I am. I tend to be very anxious, but I don't like to say that I'm an anxious person because then that becomes my identity and I see everything. I filter it through the eyes of anxiety. I just say to myself, I'm working through some anxiety. Then it puts that emotion or that thing about you outside of you so that you can move past it. It doesn't become a part of you. One of the most powerful things I think I want teenagers to realize is your identity is something that can be changed, and it's not who you truly are. It's not something that anybody gets to choose for you. If somebody one time called you shy, that doesn't mean that one day you can't be confident. If somebody said that you're bad at school, even an adult, I know that can have a lot of impact on us. They say that you're not a good learner. That doesn't mean that you can't be disciplined and focused. And even if you don't go to a good school, that doesn't mean that you're not smart or you're not going to be successful in life. If somebody labeled you as not talented or not athletic, that doesn't mean that you can't practice and develop those skills over time. And growth is literally the point of life. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to try things that don't match that version of you that people expect. If you don't like who you are based on what you think about yourself and not what other people have told you, you can change it. So what I want you to do is I want you to take some time and I want you to sit with what you see for yourself, what you want for yourself, and write down words that feel empowering and amazing. And I want you to write them as I am, or I am someone who, and really resonate with those. Sit with those words, read them over to yourself, and just kind of free write and see what comes up for you. And whichever ones that are feeling really good for you, you can circle them or put a star next to them. And then I want you to think, okay, how can I start acting from that identity, from those characteristics? If you want to become somebody who leads, what might that look like in your life? Would you become, a more outgoing person? How can you put yourself out there? What would a leader, what would an outgoing person show up like? I know for me, it was huge when I decided, oh my gosh, this is what I need to be doing. I need to be sharing this knowledge with girls. But the thought of being on video and watching myself on video, especially when I was working on my own self-confidence and seeing myself reflected constantly and then putting it out there for other people, was terrifying. But I decided that the person who I want to be in a year or 3 years is doing this like it's nothing. And they don't care what anybody else thinks. They care what the person who they're talking to and who it resonates with thinks. So whether it's a label that you have assigned yourself or one that somebody else gave you when you were growing up, you are not that label. And your identity is personal to you, and you get to decide it, and you get to change it if you're not happy with it. And who you are right now isn't necessarily who you need to be 3 or 5 years from now. You are allowed to change.